Well, my mother had an uncle when I was a child who worked in the Vatican Secretary of State's office as a civilian. And I don't remember a whole lot about him, but I just remember that when he would come home, my two uncles who were federal judges and my other uncle was a Catholic priest, and we have politicians in the family, and everyone would come over, and I remember sitting and listening to the men talk. And one thing I do remember my dad saying all the time is that there's never been a political movement that wasn't a little religious. And there's never been a religious movement that wasn't a little political. And consequently, I grew up understanding that there is, in point of fact, and to my understanding, religion is one hand, politics is another, and they help orchestrate things. These are powerful entities, and consequently, we know that that's been the case in ancient history, that the kings of great nations were also the high priest, who represented the deities also. Well, we've got the same kind of thing going today. Happily, we have divisions in government, so of course the church is invited to the White House for their prayer meetings, and they open up the Congress for prayer. But nonetheless, the military still has their paid chaplains, and there is a collusion, as far as I'm concerned, between politics and religion, because they're both philosophies, and they're both philosophies which promote, as Bill was saying, an elitist concept of, well, somebody's going to run the world, and somebody's got to do this. It might as well be us.
Now, isn't it true? Do you think that we're a Christian nation? Because I'll tell you that isn't the beginning, like our founding fathers were more in the area of Masons or even atheists, or, right?
Well, atheists or whatever, yeah. I think that there are probably a mixture. I think that some of the people coming over here were running from the Catholic Church and wanted to be Christians in their own particular way, and so they wanted to follow the Protestant view. And I think some of the politicians that came over here used that. So yes, there were some Christians who came over and did some great things in the founding of the country, but there were Freemasons who also were very important in the founding of this country and setting up the laws and regulations. There were those people who were, I suppose we would call them humanists, who also were very instrumental in helping to form the Constitution and the actual bylaws of the country. So,
Universalists, Unitarians, Quakers.
right.
Deists.
What would you say to a Christian person that is more or less closed to any other thinking than what he has been conditioned to or studied all his life, studied the Bible as he knows it, his parents know it? What would you say to them in regards to this information?
It would depend. If you're talking to 57 such people, you could probably appeal reasonably to about 6 of them, and the rest would be pretty much a lost cause. Once the mind is committed to any sort of programmed philosophy, it's very hard to open up a crack and get through there with facts or truth of any kind.
Sure.
Bystanders, if you could find any unbiased bystanders, might marvel at the density, the ignorance of the person you're trying to enlighten, and they might also do you the compliment of saying, what a wise and well-informed fellow this is. Why can't he convince the dummy? But the fact is, he can't. The human mind changes very slowly, except in extremely rare and dramatic situations. If you could change people's attitudes, let's assume for the better, very quickly, the process of psychiatric analysis would take one afternoon. In fact, it may take many years.
Right.
And it's two intelligent people talking to each other, but the person that needs help may require many years to get straight.
Sure, because after all, if there is hidden agenda here, politically and economically based, then how many centuries has it taken to take hold in the world as it is today, if that's absolutely true?
One thing to suggest to the true believer, to use that term, capital T, capital B, is to dispose him toward at least being impartial about science. Science really deals with knowledge. Individual scientists make errors, and as we look at the history of science, we see they too incorporated some now recognized as absurd beliefs at different points in the past. But those were the exceptions. By and large, it was a mighty river whose only purpose, whose only function was to find truth, whether the truth about this cup or that light or the sun, whatever it might be. And no scientist ever thought, I know what I'll do. I'll get into science and I'll do a lot of harm. That's not how it works.
Right.
You're fascinated by looking at a leaf in the sun, and that leads you into the science. So we now, I think, are more inclined to respect science than, we know this, we're more inclined to respect science today than ever in the past. And once you can get somebody to take an unbiased attitude towards science, even as an abstraction, then you can say, good, now let me grab you by the lapels and bring something else to your attention. For centuries, the churches, organized religion, have opposed science bitterly. Not all members of the Methodist Church or the Catholic Church or the Jewish faith or whatever, some of them were in fact scientists. But as a large generality, it is simply true. It is simply the case. And this is well documented, of the opposition. This is well documented in an important book that everyone really should read. Whether you're an atheist or believer, whatever you are, you should know this book. A History of the Warfare Between Science and Theology, that's one of the titles, or between science and religion. Unless you've become familiar with the information in that book, you really don't know what the hell we're talking about here today, to be very blunt.
Right, exactly. And I want to reiterate at this time that this show, hopefully, and I know that all of us have that viewpoint, that we're after the truth.
Yes.
We're after that. We're not after debarring or debasing any thing at all, any organization, but simply to bring out the truth, which I need to make a statement here. In regards to science versus religion, and I would say that maybe astrology, which is, I think in the mainstream, somewhat controversial on its validity, but I just recently came from San Francisco and just went to Washington Square. I was walking the street, and I came upon St. Peter and St. Paul Church. I looked up on the church, and in marble, carved in there, were zodiac signs. Where the winged phoenix, the winged cow, which are the fixed signs and main component in the research of astrology, which showed me that there had to be a basis from long ago, because I think that church was made like in 1890 or 1900.
A basis for what?
Basis that sciences like astrology.
It is not a science, but proceed.
Okay.
It's a discipline of its own sort.
I would think so, and I think that in some minds it is based on science because it has to deal with the calculations of the planets and various, but there's various schools and thinkings on that.
Sure.
Anyway, my point is that I think that the religion is saying that astrology is no good at all, no validity, and yet it's on their church right there. And I thought that was fascinating.
Well, in astrology, actually started off as just astronomy, which is a science.